But welcome everyone. My name is Victor Bohm. I am the Senior Director of Digital Engagement for Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. I am joined by Ron Millward, who is the founder and president of the Balanced Veterans Network, a 17-year veteran of the Air Force, a combat veteran, very much into self-care and healing, and it has a very interesting story and a very important story to share with folks. And we are also joined by Sarah Chase, who is the Executive Director of the Council for Federal Cannabis Regulation. She has extensive experience in fundraising, communications, organizational development, and legislation and government affairs. And I'll go ahead and kick it to Ron for a brief introduction of himself, and then we'll keep going.
Yeah, hey, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here and really appreciate the opportunity and all that IAVA and the Council for Federal Cannabis Regulation are doing in this space. My name is Ron Millward, and I just want to make a quick correction. I am not a 17-year veteran. I'm just a 7-year veteran, but that was enough for me. And, you know, I'm grateful to be doing what I'm doing. We launched Balanced Veterans back in 2018, and we advocate for all alternative therapies for veterans and their families. And so we really lean on our community, the educational aspect, and really having a place for veterans to ask these questions and have the conversations that they may not feel comfortable having in the VA right now. Thank you very much. And Sarah?
Well, Victor, Ron, thank you both for having me today. It's a real pleasure. I'm not a veteran, but I'm the daughter of one, and I am the cousin of many. So it's a real pleasure to be here to talk with both of you. And I'm the executive director for the Council for Federal Cannabis Regulation. We're a nonprofit that's based here in DC, and our mission is really to assist the government and specifically the federal regulatory agencies to really help to rethink, to develop and implement evidence-based cannabis regulations. And our overarching goal is the destigmatization, the normalization, and legitimization of cannabis on behalf of the consumers, the professionals, organizations, veterans, and every of the businesses who support and serve you. And we do this with CFCR by being a conduit for informed scientific research, inclusive education, and by really mainstreaming best practices for this industry so that it can survive and thrive.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you both for co-hosting this event. It's happening at the right time. You know, alternative therapies and cannabis discussion on 420, the national cannabis, I guess, holiday, you would say. I just want to remind the audience back home on Facebook, please drop your comments and questions in the chat box, and we will answer them as soon as we can, or during the Q&A that we'll have at the end. And as we go through the discussion, we'll be dropping links into the chat box for you to follow along. So we'll be having that. So I guess let's jump right in. Ron, I know that you as a veteran, you have extensive experience working in the cannabis space as a veteran, and you have quite the story for how you got into working in this space. Can you talk a little bit about your experience and how you got to where you're at now?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, unfortunately, my story is very common. Now having a community and hearing stories daily of veterans that are really struggling post-service, I felt like I was alone at the time, and now, you know, it feels great to have this community. But while I was in the military, I had a few deployments, and I started to struggling with my PTSD. From there, I had a couple friends commit suicide, and it just started to spiral. Not to mention, I joined the military when I was 17 years old with parental consent. And so really becoming a man, whatever that looks like for myself through the military, it's a different culture, you know? And so having all of that sort of training, throwing in a couple deployments, traveling, I think I moved 33 different times while I was in the military. All of that sort of compounded on top of the childhood trauma and things that I was already bringing in with my military experience. And I really couldn't see a way through it, and started to be prescribed pharmaceuticals to kind of alleviate some of those symptoms. Next thing you know, I was stuck in that polypharmacy trap, and they just continued to prescribe different medications to really care for some of the side effects and the ailments that I was trying to mediate. And I unfortunately felt like there was no other option for me. I was a zombie on my couch. I didn't want to be alive anymore. Really, there was no real purpose for me. And so I decided to take a bunch of pills, drink alcohol, and try to kill myself. And I'm so grateful that I did not succeed. And I got institutionalized. I got put into a psych ward where I was under observation for 24 hours a day. And I realized while I was in there that there was absolutely nothing wrong with me, that I was able to finally see that there were so many compounding things that had happened in my life during my experiences in the military. And, you know, and from that, it gave me some peace, but I was still really struggling. I left that facility on a lot of pharmaceuticals and continued to really just not find a life of thriving. I couldn't figure out what was next for me. And fortunately, I had a friend introduce me to cannabis, and they had mentioned that they had seen some documentary and talked about how cannabis could be helpful in some ways. And I was skeptical. I had, not really used cannabis before. And so with this experience for the first time, I remember it vividly, just being able to sort of relax and settle into my own body. And for a moment, just sort of, the noise was still there, but it was a little more tolerable. I was able to kind of see through some of that cloudiness. And it was just one of the most incredible experiences for me. And so from there, I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. And really, the world of cannabis is extremely confusing, especially for some folks that may just be starting out. And so, you know, it was quite the journey. There were a few years there of just kind of learning and figuring out what was best for my body and genuinely advocating for my own health. I chose to take my health into my own hands and find what worked for me. And so from that, I had realized there were not a lot of real holistic living nonprofits. There are a lot of veteran orgs, but there were not a lot of folks that were in community talking about, you know, yoga, breathing, meditation, and cannabis, all of the things in conjunction to live a more holistic, better, we call it balanced life. And so we launched Balanced Veterans, and from there with a couple other veterans, and we've just started to grow and just to spread education and community and camaraderie around some of these different alternative therapies that veterans and their families are choosing to use to heal post-service.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that story. That's incredible. Sarah, how did you get into the cannabis space? And are you hearing anything that's very similar to Ron's story about his situation as far as?
Yeah, Ron, I mean, it's heartbreaking that your story is widely available as it is. I mean, there are so many people who we've heard from who have had a similar experience, and thankfully, you know, they've come to a good outcome too. And we've heard also from people who are cancer survivors or cancer patients who use this. I don't want to say as medicine, but they'd certainly use it as a therapy at this stage. And particularly if you're dealing with cancer, you know, it's a good way to be able to build up an appetite, to be able to consume food, particularly if you're on some sort of chemotherapy drug. So there are ways in which this plant does enhance the ability for the body to heal, as both a medicinal sort of therapy and also as a sort of self-help therapy. And I actually didn't get into this because of a use or any kind of background. I had worked at the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science, and we were helping scientists to be better communicators so that they could advocate for, better approaches to science, better funding, better public policy around their approach to science. This was something that kind of popped into my space because I was interested in sustainability, which I found in the hemp world, and sort of the industrial hemp side of this. And then I was interested in alternative energy sources. And I was interested in areas that would be of use in terms of social justice, social equity, and health justice and health equity. And cannabis sort of fit into all those worlds for me. And then as I've gotten more and more into this, the medical side has really sort of, I think, popped into it. And, it's been just an amazing experience to find all these stories and folks like you, Victor, you, Ron, who have come together, who have sort of galvanized and found the support of this industry around so many different facets of it.
Yeah, definitely. A little bit more on that. Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America has really supported research into cannabis and getting alternative therapies and other options out there for veterans. And, recently we surveyed our membership, and close to 90% of the respondents said that that they support medicinal cannabis research at the VA to help provide other options for veterans. What in your this question is for both of you. What do you think the major difficulty is with the VA and cannabis? Is it because it's a federal institution? Because cannabis is Schedule I? I mean, what is the main issue?
You nailed it right there. It is because it's still a Schedule I drug and it's not federally legal. The VA, if you read the regulations, the current regulations, they're very supportive of it at the state level, but lacking any kind of federal mandate for them. Their hands are effectively tied at this stage because of that. They do have very good resources. I was on the VA page today. And if you are at the state level as a medical user, the VA has some really good resources that are posted for you and sort of how to navigate the system. And the number one thing for veterans to know is that you can be a medical cannabis user and you will not face any kind of penalties with the VA. They're not supportive of it in terms of they don't prescribe it at their pharmacies or their clinics. Their physicians can't make any sort of prescription or anything for it. But if you are at a state level, it's legal state, I must add that, legal state, then your benefits are exactly the same. It's just not covered under any of your benefits though. So there's no insurance or any kind of coverage for you in that sense. But they do, for the most part, seem very actively exploring ways to make this more available for US veterans.
So thank you for that. So currently, let's say that I'm a veteran and I live in a state where it is legal and it is an option that I want to pursue to help me. And I do go to the VA for my medical, my healthcare. And if I wanted to talk to my doctor, my physician, or my nurse about it, they couldn't give me any recommendations or anything about it at all. I think, Ron, you might know more about this situation because I think you've dealt with it, but would that hurt my benefits and my disability benefits if the VA found out that I was using cannabis as an alternative therapy, even in a state where it's legal?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, on the publichealth.va.gov/marijuana, they've got all of the guidance that they clearly list. And so the interesting part about this, and I've navigated this myself, I've disclosed my medical use in a legal state, Pennsylvania. I've got a card. I've been prescribed that called medication in our state. And I am able to disclose that to my VA providers. The difficulty is they are not very educated on it. And so in conjunction with the care that I'm already receiving, it's really difficult to talk about what is best and how this is, interacting with my care that's already happening. And then really in our community, we've heard actual horror stories. And so some folks have disclosed their use and they have been taking or tapered off of other pharmaceuticals that they were using for potential pain relief, different opioids, things like that. And so it really is a case-by-case basis, depending on your provider, depending on the VA. And so I think it would be important in the future to have some sort of overall regulation for how they are choosing to treat this. And really at the end of the day, this is not really written into law. And at any moment, it scares me to be able to disclose that and then change something and boom, we lose our benefits or something is not protected in some way. And so I really would love to see just more protections around the folks that are choosing to use these as alternative therapies as they navigate this. And really the educational aspect. There are, just like us, there are nonprofits that are there to educate and really coming alongside the VA to help facilitate some of that, and some of the community aspect that comes along with it, I think is vital moving forward. So the answer I would say is you are okay to have a card in a legal state or a recreational state, and your VA care will not be lost or subject to change. But that's a case-by-case basis, and I think you need to be comfortable disclosing that.
And I would say if anybody has had an experience where they've been denied a benefit, and this is the reason why, they need to report that directly right now too. So advocate for yourself. If at any situation where you've been denied any kind of benefit with the VA because of medical marijuana use, call them and call your senators, call your congressmen, and let them know that that happened.
Right. Thank you very much. That's incredibly important. I guess it's time to jump into the legislative side just for a brief moment. IAVA has supported the Medicinal Cannabis Research Act for I guess four sessions of Congress, and slowly but surely, as the stigma is being lifted, we're getting it further and further each time through Congress. But currently, the VA Medicinal Cannabis Research Act has just passed out of committee in the House. So it doesn't look like that's going to move too quickly this year, just because there's a lot of things going on in Congress. We have elections coming up. What other pieces of legislation are out there for cannabis? What other cannabis legislation is out there? And can you speak to what part or what role you have in that, Sarah?
Sure. Well, as of this morning, I was on congress.gov and I counted, I think it's about 56 bills that were introduced over the last year and a half for medical use cannabis, and specifically for veterans too. So there are a number of them out there. We tend to think of them at CFCR as sort of what you might call a socialization bill. So it's kind of planting the seed for sort of long-term consideration, so that people start to think through some of the intended and unintended consequences of the way in which the legislation is passed. And we deal with regulation, which is essentially the implementation of legislation once it's passed. So as you're talking about legislation, you always have to also think about regulation, because that is actually how it is enacted in the real world. And that's what the legislators are really doing with a lot of these bills, is to sort of socialize this idea, get a heat map on the American public. And, we know the figures that 91% of Americans support federal legalization for cannabis, and 60% of that is specifically for adult use, and 31% for medical use. So there's a strong national trend that's been occurring over the last 10 years to really make this federally legal. The main bills that are out there right now that have a great deal of traction and have gotten a lot of, and I should say by a great deal of traction, they're talked about a lot. They haven't gone too far. Like the MORE bill has passed the House multiple times. You have the MACE Act, the MACE bill, which is the States Reform Act, brought out by Nancy Mace, which is a new one this year. There's the MORE Act again. And then there's what's called the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act, which is the big bill in the Senate that will be introduced for the first time sometime between now and August. And that's broadly supported by Booker, Wyden, and Schumer. And that was put out initially in August of last year for comments. And a lot of most of the organizations, including CFCR, submitted comments about how the language in the bill should be organized, how it should be talked about, and how it should be implemented later on. So that's probably the biggest, most substantive bill that will come out this year. And half the world says that Schumer's got the votes for it, and half the world says he doesn't. It's sort of to be seen. But regardless, it's good to get people talking about it. It's good to find out what people like and don't like about the bill, and then sort of build another level of support around that. The reality is probably that federal legalization is anywhere from 3 to 5 years away still. And that is to provide this with a long enough runway for there to be enough of a paradigm shift for this to actually occur. And it's going to take a while, but I think we're so close in this battle at this stage that you can't give up, you can't get discouraged. It is now just really thinking through the regulation side of this. And once it is legalized, how are we going to regulate it?
Right. Well, I think there's generally a lot of support in the veteran community for legislation to legalize cannabis. I mean, half of our members report actually using cannabis, but there could be a larger number of folks who actually use it who don't want to report it because they're afraid of possible repercussions. How do you think the Biden administration views medical cannabis use?
I think that is sort of the area where you have general consistency with the Biden administration. I think he's been very consistent in talking about how he views cannabis, which is not always in the best light. And Biden's from a certain generation, and he thinks in a certain way. However, he was very clear, and he has been pretty much to his word as best he can be on moving legislation along. And in that, he did talk specifically about moving medical use cannabis forward. So I think that hearing stories like Ron's, the more that we can understand the perspective and also create a better world for scientific research around this too at this stage, because that's really that next part of this is we need better clinical trials. We need to move beyond just sort of real world evidence. We need some of the hardcore data about what are the effects on the body, what are proper dosing levels. We need to talk about tox reports and things that will really examine what THC does, what CBD does, what all the minor cannabinoids do. And we're also finding that cannabis is not the only plant that creates cannabinoids. So this is opening up a whole new world for botanists, because we understand it interacts with the system, with the endocannabinoid system, your ECS. We don't always know how or why, and we're just sort of discovering that there is this new level of how plants as a whole are interacting with our body, and cannabis just happening to be one that's been around for millennia, that's been used safely by people. So I think if you put your science hat on for a minute, we're at a really cool time, because now we can kind of investigate this on a number of different ways. And I love Ron's approach to it, because it is looking at this as a healing therapy, as a medical therapy, and as something that heals from the inside and outside at the same time. So let's put on the wonder of science hat at this stage and see what happens.
Right. Definitely. I mean, Iraq and Afghanistan, IAVA has been super supportive of the VA Medicinal Cannabis Research Act for a while. We even have, for folks at home, if you want to tell your member of Congress to support the VA Medicinal Cannabis Research Act, you can take action. We'll drop that link into the comment section for you to reach out to your member of Congress to let them know that you support medical research, especially in the veteran space. I think veterans have a unique position where we're not partisan. Everyone should support veterans. I'm a little biased because I'm also a veteran, but we're not right or left. We sometimes can be seen as the rudder for the country, I guess you would say. A lot of folks are engaged with their communities, and veterans can definitely be that. I would say guidepost for the country. And we do what we can to support things, and sometimes we get out in front. I think the VA Medicinal Cannabis Research Act is definitely one of those times, and one of those pieces of legislation that can help drive the conversation and get that science that we need.
Yeah, Victor, you're from Maine, so they used to say, "As goes Maine, so goes the nation." So, and I think you're quite right with the veterans. You are definitely leading the charge here.
Yeah, definitely. Maine is a great place. We definitely get out in front a lot of times. A lot of wars. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of wars, and Mainers definitely step up and answer the call. I wanted to ask both of you, how can veterans best engage with their legislators on these issues, especially the issue of alternative therapies, from your perspective? I guess we'll start with Ron.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important to get involved. If this is something that has helped you in any way, we need everybody's voice. And so utilizing the tools like that, message sender that you guys have with IAVA, I've used that, and it's super helpful just to be able to quickly send a message and share your support and ask your representatives to support it as well. And so getting involved in a local level is also very important. We are located in multiple state levels, and so having veterans involved in their local legislation and what's moving with those medical and recreational programs, that's incredibly important. And really just unifying our voices, this type of an event, showing that, IAVA, Balanced Veterans, these other orgs are coming together and we're in support of something that we know is helping. I mean, to get really real about it, we've got this monstrous suicide epidemic that is happening in our community. We've lost we've had 2 suicides in our community in the last month, and it's just not getting any better. And I believe that, you know, the statistics were anywhere from 17 to 22 a day, and that doesn't even include spouses, active duty, the family members, the effects that happen when that actually occurs. And so it's sad to hear that we may be 3 to 5 years out from that you know, nationwide legislation. And so really pushing in the states that don't have access for at least state level support is vital. There are lives on the line. I know Texas right now, with Texas Veterans for Medical Marijuana and David Bass, they're pushing really hard to gain some sort of a state level access there. And so getting involved in the fight, so to say, in your local state is very, very important, and can help us in a federal way as well, because of the numbers and the unification.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yes, Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would encourage all of you who are representative of groups that are out there for veterans, please contact CFCR, because one of the things that we're taking on as an initiative is to put together a public hearing with the VA, specifically to address a number of these issues and to support legislation like Victor's been talking about too. So go on our website at uscfcr.org and contact me directly, and we're putting together the coalition for it. The other thing is, don't be afraid to tell your stories. They make the biggest impact, and that is, you know, we're human beings, and storytelling is how we relate to one another. You know, I'm the daughter of a Marine veteran who served in Vietnam from 63 to 67. My dad came back as a horrible alcoholic, and you know, I think had he had alternative therapies, that would have probably saved him a little bit. And to Ron's point, he did at one point try to kill himself. So, you know, there are so many ways we can help people. We need to be real about these stories at this stage, because lifting that stigma is incredibly important. So don't be afraid to tell your story. Call your local representative, call your congresspeople, write them. You know, do whatever you can to say, I support this bill. I'm in with IAVA and BVN, and we want to see this happen. Write to the president, send letters, send emails, post on social media. I'll sort of say there's 2 ways you can do it. You could be real activist about it, right? Or you can also educate at the same time. And I think it's best to educate. And that is through your story, what's happened to you. And that is, you know, really kind of, you know, just being able to help the person who's on the receiving end of that message to be able to relate to you, so that they can really deeply understand what it is that you're going through and why this is helpful to you. And that to me is education. It's not as much activism, which is just sort of shouting information at you. But if you're relatable to the other person, that's incredibly important. And I would also get involved with, you know, the VFW, the Legion, Lions clubs, you know, local groups that can be there to support you, and get them involved in these campaigns too. You know, amplify and educate at the same time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do think that reducing the stigma, you know, in order to reduce the stigma behind the use of cannabis, it takes a lot of effort. And I think sharing of stories is definitely crucial to lowering the stigma, because you can have an individual, especially a veteran, on the call right now who's watching from home, you know, listen to Ron's story and his experience, and you know, they can say, you know, you know, I've gone through something that's similar to that. You know, I raised my hand, you know, I step forward, I'm with you. And I think that for the folks listening at home, it's incredibly important for you to share your story. Sometimes it can be a little daunting and harrowing and scary, but it's definitely important, and it means a lot to the community, and it's super valuable. And I will almost go so far to say that Congress reacts better to individual stories than they do the overall issue, because it's something that they can understand, just like anyone else. You know, I would listen to stories over, you know, a boring monologue of some issue, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
If you look at a lot of the bills that do get passed and mostly at the state level, but in terms of cannabis use, they're because of a particular story that somebody told and they got the ear of their congressperson, and they got it done. And that is really, you may have Victor and Ron's bill go forward, and that's just to be as effective as SR 1879, the
Right.
bill.
Right.
And that is, that's how Americans respond to things. That's how politics is done. And it is because people can understand the story and they can relate to it, and they understand the need.
Sarah, I just want to say thank you for mentioning that representing. Really, I think we have an obligation to represent this plant well. And when we're telling our stories, the educational aspect, because we all know the story of, the other generations talking about the stigmas and people losing their minds by using cannabis and all of the negative stories that people have heard and regurgitate. I've heard politicians tell me some of the most interesting stories. And I'm like, please let me share my experience with you and so many others. And so, there are different approaches to it. And I believe that if we can tell those stories and change the narrative, like that is the most important thing, is breaking the stigma down. We've got so many folks coming to this plant and you would never even know. I mean, there are different generations and folks with different backgrounds, and very excited for us at the National Cannabis Festival coming up here this weekend. We've got a panel that's happening, and there are veterans from various different backgrounds, people that are thriving in college, folks that are in business, and there are just different folks that are utilizing this plant as really a tool to help them just kind of tap into different things and find that new life and that balance moving forward. So really excited to continue sharing those stories, and education is just everything.
And one thing I appreciate about both of you tremendously is that, when you approached me to be on this live with you, the responsible nature at which you approached it with, and I know that both of you, with the groups that you represent, you take this on your shoulders, and it is not always easy to advocate like this. It's not always easy to tell these stories in the face of what has been for a long time the government saying that this is a bad thing, right? And that billions of dollars have been spent by our government to make cannabis use. It was the war on drugs. It was everything that has gone into this. And there's both the stigma from the minority communities and also with the veterans community. And, I think that aligning those messages and attempting now to say to the government and it's sort of a re-education process in the other way at this point, because now it's the time to say, well, maybe the last 70 years of this has not been good. And that, the stories that should have been told didn't, because money was spent to tell the other side of the story and not the whole story. And I think now we are telling the whole story, and it's a chance to kind of level that playing field.
And the unfortunate lives that were lost by being put in jail and criminalized over this plant, it is devastating. And so, I know that is part of this, the rehabilitation aspect, as this does become more legal, and helping those folks that have been really hurt by the war on drugs. It's terribly sad.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. Before we go any further, I want to mention that folks at home, if you have questions, please drop it into the comment section and we'll get them answered here shortly. Before we go to questions, though, I want to just touch on one last thing. This weekend is the, annual National Cannabis Festival, and our partners at the National Cannabis Festival the folks at the National Cannabis Festival have partnered with veterans organizations like the Balanced Veterans Network and Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. And this weekend, they're going to have a veterans pavilion tent where all veterans are welcome. We're going to drop in a link to in the comment section for veterans if you want to go. It's going to be in DC. I think it starts this Friday. Sarah, you know a little bit about what's happening on Friday. Can you just touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, bless Caroline Phillips, who actually is a member of CFCR too, who puts this together every year. She's the founder and kind of runs the show, and it's a big show, so she's got a lot on her shoulders to pull it off. But they do a really good event on Friday, which is free and open to the public, and that's their policy summit, and that takes place ironically at the Ronald Reagan Trade Building. But it's a good spot for it. They've got a lot of speakers coming in. They've got people off the Hill. They've got people from Normal. Great panels that are put together for the day. So if you really want to understand what's going on the legislative side, on the advocacy side, that's a great day to go and get yourself educated about the policy side of cannabis. So highly encourage everybody to. I think that starts at, I want to say at 9 a.m. and goes till like 4 or 5 in the afternoon. So it's an all-day education seminar, and again, free and open to the public. And then there's some sponsored events that night. And then, yeah, Saturday and Sunday are just 2 great days of sort of open panel discussions all day long. I know Ben and Jerry's is going to be there offering ice cream. They got a lot of, good food and event sponsors. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's the weather here in DC right now. You can't see out the window, but it's going to be gorgeous this weekend. So it's a great time to get outside. Also, I would say if you're a parent and you want to help introduce your child safely to this, whether you are a consumer or you understand that at some point they're going to be curious about this is probably not a bad way to do it, and learn about, again, the whole story around this use and how to be safe and legal about it, as we talk about I don't like to call it the recreational market, but the adult use market. So sort of, if your parents are telling you about alcohol when you're 18 and 17, they should be telling you about cannabis now and kind of paving the way for what will be a legal market as some of these kids become adults. So they ought to be educated now, and just kind of prime the pump a little bit on that. That's my own soapbox. That's not representative of CFCR, but I do think if you're going to be a responsible parent, you take this as a learning opportunity, as an educating opportunity. And then I think on Sunday too, they have Canatech, where they're bringing in a number of different entrepreneurs who are starting up new businesses. So it's a great time to hear from them, get some feedback, and learn a little bit about the business side of the industry too, which is always fun.
Absolutely. And folks at home, if you will be in the DC area and you do want to go, again, we're going to drop a link to the National Cannabis Festival in the chat box. And if you go to that link, you can learn about all the events and the exciting stuff that's happening. And if you do go to the event, I think all of us on this live will be at the event at the same time on Saturday. So if you want to stop by the Veterans Pavilion tent, you can meet both Ron and myself, and we'll track down Sarah at some point. If you don't mind, I'm going to jump right into the Q&A section. We have a question from our folks at home. In legal states, does the Balanced Veterans Network have any programs to help veterans who are not familiar with cannabis?
Yeah, absolutely. That is what we're all about, really. We've got lots of on-ramps and introductory levels. So there's education from all things to, I have no idea what this is, to legal states that are allowing cultivation. We've got a cultivation mentorship, which will teach you how to grow that at home in legal states. And so really there is a plethora of resources on our community. We've got a private secure network. All you do is it's free to join. You can join, and there's a bunch of education back there. And then our team is always available to answer questions.
Thank you very much. That's amazing. This question is for Sarah. How do you engage with patient advocacy groups, and how does your mission align with veterans?
Yeah, well, I think we're out to normalization, destigmatization, and legitimization of this are our 3 core principles. So we've talked a lot with the Americans for Safe Access, and we are hoping that they will at some point be a partner organization of ours too. Ted Thompson, who's at the Michael J. Fox Foundation, works with Parkinson's research. He's on our board. And then the policy experts from the Epilepsy Foundation are also on our board. And we actively encourage anybody from all of the patient advocacy groups to please be in contact with us. We are in the process of forming both a Veterans Coalition and a Patient Advocacy Coalition. So we want to sort of be as much of a unified voice going forward as we can, in order to sort of sort out what the regulatory framework will be in the future. And we see that working with patients and with patient advocacy groups and with veterans as essential to that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. My next question is, why is quality and product safety such an important concern?
Ron, you want me to take that one? Start?
It's up to you. I've got something to say as well, so I'd love to hear from you though.
Well, I think particularly if you're medical use cannabis, you do want to make sure that, and this is, let's say you are a cancer patient and you are dealing, you're both on chemotherapy and you're taking cannabis at the same time. You want to make sure that, one, there are no drug-on-drug interactions that you should be aware of. You want to make sure that you take it with some sort of, or if you're adding CBD or something to it, you want to make sure that you're taking it with food or something so you can metabolize it properly. You also want to make sure that the quality of the product is consistent, so you always get the same type of dose at the same percentage levels. And that's been the real big difficulty without federal regulation, is we don't always know what's in the product that you're receiving. You really do want to go to a very reputable dispensary and make sure that you're working with somebody who has been at this for a while, because you do want to make sure that you get a high quality product, that you can verify as much as possible what the THC, what the CBD, all the minor cannabinoid levels are within that product. And you also want to make sure that it was grown in a very clean facility, and that it's under it's been under compliance standards to whatever possible level you can, that they are as state compliant as possible, and that you just want to make sure that you don't want to go to particularly if you're a medical user, you don't want to go to like the local gas station and buy a hemp roll or buy a CBD product. You do want to go to a reputable dispensary. You want to have your medical card, and I would advise that you go to somebody who has been at this for a while and has some training, so that you can again get a good quality product that will be safe and allow your body to do what it needs to do to heal.
I would love to add on, and that was incredible. Thank you, Sarah. I really enjoy the way that Pennsylvania is running their program. Now, the problem is the prices and the access and the availability of the products are not always there. But what is really great is every single dispensary has a pharmacist on staff. And then all of our testing includes all of the minor cannabinoids and then all of the terpenes that are also within that plant. And so this might sound like a foreign language to some, but this plant is so amazing. There are hundreds of different compounds that are within every plant, and it's different per strain depending on what you're using. And so as you navigate this, understanding how these different terpenes and cannabinoids interact in your body takes your experience to the whole other level. And so without having some of the research to understand exactly what's going on, we've got veterans, and myself included, where we can keep a journal of what we were using and what has helped. And if I'm going to college and looking for more focus, this was a strain that kind of helped me in that area because of these terpenes and these cannabinoids. And so really understanding, and again, this comes back to you advocating for your own health. Having clean medicine and lab testing can just be another added tool for you to really take that to the next level. I'd love to shout out friends of ours, High Grade Labs, who I think are watching, and really the important and vital work that they do. Being able to, analyze what's going on in that plant, you can really tell the environment that it was grown in, and how that plant was treated and how it was processed as it came to the product side. So it's really important to have that. But again, we are talking about states and so many people that cannot access cannabis. And so, and if you cannot get to some sort of tested product, it's difficult, but I believe we need more availability for that, and especially on the CBD side. Thank you for mentioning that, Sarah.
Yeah, and let me add one thing too to that, Ron. That was also excellent, because I failed to mention the terpenes, and thanks for the shout out to High Grade, because Elijah and that team are great, and they're all West Point grads. The other aspect of this is what's called bioavailability too, so that you want to make sure that, and I talked a little bit about how your body metabolizes it. But there are some people don't like to smoke, so you can look at various ways to consume it, whether it's via a pill or a tincture or an oil, teas, foods, edibles. there are a number of different ways that don't always involve smoking too. So that has to do with how you feel safest in your consumption. And again, just looking at a product that's going to be right for you, that matches both what your body needs and sort of, fits with how you like to consume things.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. In the essence of time, I think let's go to closing remarks and we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us. You have incredible experience in this space, and your expertise is definitely valued. I'm sure there's a lot of folks at home who've got a lot out of this, and if they haven't watched it, we'll make sure that it's available on our Facebook page and our website. And I also want to make sure that folks at home, veterans and family members, if you need help accessing or navigating any of your benefits, reach out to our Quick Reaction Force team. We'll put the link into the chat box, the comment section. We have a staff. We have folks who are standing by to help you 24/7. We have a phone number that we'll have on the comment section, and a link for you to reach out to our folks. Please do. It's anonymous. You'll get a experienced veteran care manager who's on the other end of the line who can help you. So please do that if you need some support. I'll go ahead and kick it off to you, Ron, for closing remarks, and we'll keep going.
Yeah, hey, again, thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you for the work that y'all do at IAVA. Cannabis is not for everybody. We didn't mention that. And so really, make sure you do the due diligence and learn about how it works in your body and interacts with the different medications that you may be using, and do that research. And really, cannabis is an amazing tool, and it can also be even more impactful if you are utilizing that with other modalities. And so at the Balanced Veterans Network, we introduce veterans and their families to all different alternative therapies. Every week, we've got weekly wellness classes with introductions to yoga, breathing, meditation. And so really utilizing some of these other tools that we have available for us in conjunction with cannabis can be really powerful on your post-service healing journey. And so again, just thank you for this opportunity. I'm grateful to be here. There's nowhere else I would rather be. And, it's not lost on me that we have lost so many friends along the way. And there are so many service members that I believe if they would have maybe had the understanding of different alternative therapies, we could have saved them, and they may still be here. And I don't like to live in the what if, and I think about my friends all of the time that could be here, and I try to live my life with honor for them. But realizing that, I really hope that if you're listening and you're a politician or you're in the government in any way, this is so incredibly important. And we're over here, we don't have a loud voice, but we're screaming from the mountaintops that this is helping many people. And so really appreciate you in the sense of urgency and just listening to our voices. Thank you. And again, Victor and Sarah, it's been an honor. Really appreciate this time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Sarah?
Well, bless you both for taking the time and for being here and for putting this together, because I think conversations like this, really do move us to the next step. And the conversations like this also do save people's lives, because you are able to sort of be the people who are out there in front leading the charge and saying, it's okay to talk about this. And that's, it's okay to talk about this, and it's okay. And I also appreciate Ron stating that, cannabis is not the be all and end all of this. There are lots of ways that you can seek therapy and help. And I think I love the idea of Balanced Veterans Network, because here you have, you're talking about holistic therapies, you're talking about medical therapies, you're talking about pharmacological approaches, mental approaches, yoga, health, exercise, eating, diets, everything. It all kind of comes together because, we have to treat this and the body at the same time. So I mean, kudos to both of you for bringing that out and for helping veterans to go through that experience and to help heal from the inside and outside. And I encourage everybody to take part with CFCR. You can go to our website at uscfcr.org. If you are representing a veterans group, we really do want to hear from you, because we are building that coalition out. So it's a great time if, we would like to have as many voices at the table when we go to the public hearing with the Veterans Administration. That's a fundamental important for us, and I think for all of you too. I also, continue to support this. Keep calling your representatives, keep calling at the White House level, keep advocating for this, keep telling those stories. You know, I think at the same time, you know, if you need help, go to the resources that I know Victor and Ron are putting into in the page for you. You know, if you've got a story to tell and nobody else will listen, email me. You know, I think at CFCR, we view ourselves very much as public servants too. And this is, you know, we're here to help inform human health and safety, and, you know, through a regulatory process around that. So we're here as advocates and public servants to serve the greater good and to serve all of you.
Thank you both so much. One last plug for the National Cannabis Festival. If folks at home, if you're watching and you'll be in the DC area, you can meet all of us panelists in person. It'll be a fun time. It'll be great to you know, fellowship with each other. And the last word I'll give is happy 420 and be safe, everyone. And hope you have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.